Hey guys, it is Marcus and Terry back with you at Talk Sober here. You could go and check out our stuff at talksober.com and support the channel. And today what we're doing is we are talking about Ram Dass, who was formerly known as Richard Alpert, who is a Harvard professor of psychology, and he taught psychology and stuff like that in Harvard. And he was one of the ones that got caught up in the LSD culture, the culture of hippie stuff, I think is the official term. And he was on a quest to find himself. And I find that his talks are very, very instrumental to my sobriety. And we just found out that last week Ram Dass had passed away. He was older in his years, so it was about time. And I just wanted to do this talk to talk about the things that have helped me in my journey to sobriety, in my journey in life, and everything like that, because I think that it can help you as well. And there's a lot of different life philosophies that Ram Dass had. And for those of you that don't know his story, I'll give you a brief overview. He was a Harvard professor, and he was really struggling in life and finding his way and understanding how things were. He had made it to the pillar of success, which was being a Harvard professor, where everyone looks up to you and says, wow, that guy's got to know everything. I mean, you don't get much smarter than a Harvard professor, right? And he found his life was kind of like empty and meaningless, and he didn't know how to deal with neuroses in his mind. He didn't know how to deal with the certain thoughts that plagued him and things like that. And so he met a guy by the name of Timothy Leary. They were both working at Harvard at the time, and they were doing research into various different drugs and things for psychology to see what would help people. In their journey, they discovered several different things, like different psychedelic drugs and stuff like that. And they noticed that these drugs helped them attain some kind of state that they were looking for before. Now, before you go any further, this is not promoting any drugs or psychedelics or anything. I think if you read and listen to Ram Dass, you will find out, hey, you know what? The psychedelics helped me reach where I needed to reach, but that wasn't the be all end all. And that's certainly not something you need to do to reach what you need to reach, which is calmness of mind and really changing your life philosophy and understanding what life's all about and understanding how the mind works. And so he talks about it numerous times where he says, the use of chemicals and things to get you to a certain state, they work for that time, but you can only stay for a short window of time. And then he goes on to say that what he found throughout life is that if you attain these naturally, if you actually do the work and to do the understanding and surrender to your mind and to the universe, then you will be able to stay there for your life. And that's what he found out throughout his life. I think, when he died last week, he probably hadn't taken any kind of drug like that in many, many years. And what he found throughout that is him and Timothy Leary kind of went their own ways at a certain point. Ram Dass went to India and got caught up in the India guru type phase. And he learned a lot, and a lot of things that he taught are very, very important to my understanding of sobriety, my understanding of life, my understanding of where we're at. Because when I was drinking, and I don't know if you attribute this to the drinking or just my life, or if it was the life that made me drink or whatever, right? It's two sides, chicken and egg, which came first kind of deal. But my mind was all over the place, and I literally thought that I was a prisoner of my mind. I remember I was trying to paint this picture where I wanted to paint this thing because I do oil painting, and I wanted to paint this thing where it showed what it was like to be trapped in a mind. And then I sobered up the next day and I realized it looked like a giant ass. And I was like, yeah, that painting isn't exactly what I had in my mind. But at that time, I didn't know how to get out of my mind. I didn't know how to get out of my thoughts. And I thought that I was a prisoner of my mental capacity. I was a prisoner of what I thought. And listening to Ram Dass, listening to Alan Watts, listening to Werner Erhard, a lot of these people in the beginning of my sobriety showed me that there's a different way. And what we're going to do is we're going to discuss this. I got a bunch of quotes here that we're going to read. And it's kind of a helpful thing, I think, to realize that there are people out there that you can listen to. And Ram Dass, for me, is one of my kind of like safe place to listen to. If I'm ever in a jam, if I ever feel like things are going really bad, if I ever can't get out of a mood, I'll put on a Ram Dass talk on my phone or my computer, and I'll listen to it, and it'll take me to that place where I could just remember that all this stuff that is in my mind, all these things are society and they're illusions and they're not really real. And when you get back to reality, which is right now, focusing right now, Because what happens is our mind wants to go forward and it wants to go back. It wants to go forward and say, oh, what are we going to do tomorrow? How are we going to get that raise? When are we going to buy the house? What am I going to get for Christmas? What am I going to give for Christmas? What do I got here? What am I going to do with my family? Or maybe it goes in the past with, I was abused. I had this. I had all this stuff. And we get stuck in the neurosis of our mind going forward and going back instead of living right now, because right now is really all we have, and right now is everything. So I'm going to read a few quotes, and then we'll get Terry's take, and then we'll discuss kind of how Ram Dass has helped me, how it's helped Terry, and how the different life philosophies that you build are what's going to keep you sober. Right? I don't care about anything else, but if you change your life philosophy from I'm a prisoner of my mind, or I'm depressed, or I'm this, or I'm that, and you change your life philosophy to I can see outside myself, and it's not all about me, and we realize how self-centered it is. You know, the psychologists say that the average person thinks like 100 and, or I think it's the average person thinks 65,000 thoughts a day. And if you're anything like me, I would venture to say that about 64,999 of them are probably about yourself. And we don't realize how self-absorbed we are, and we don't realize, hey, who is this person in my mind that's narrating, that's talking, that's thinking? So some of the quotes that I have for you before we get dived in, or before we dive in, one is, the heart that surrenders everything to the moment, or let me say that again. The heart surrenders everything to the moment. The mind judges and holds back. The resistance to the unpleasant situation is the root of suffering. Emotions are like waves. Watch them disappear in the distance on the vast, calm ocean. And I love that one, because it's kind of like our emotions are waves in the ocean. It's not the whole ocean. Our thoughts, our life, what we want is a wave in the ocean. It's not the whole ocean. And when you pan back and you look at your life from a distance, rather than I want this, or I need to have that, or this person's mean, or that person's bad, right? And it's not to say put yourself in harm's way. It's say pan back and look at it and say, these are waves in my life. And a lot of people who get caught up in things, and severe depression, and severe cases of just not wanting to live and things like that, they don't look at it. They're doing what I call riding the waves. And they're riding the waves, and they're looking at it, and they're at the top of the wave, and they're like, fuck, this is amazing. And they get to the bottom, and they're like, oh man, this sucks. Instead of looking at it and saying, oh, life is, it goes. Like some people get waves. At one moment, Terry might get a wave, and I might get a trough, I think is what they call it, right? And at the next moment, it might be the other way. And we have to look at it, as Alan Watts always said, as life not just happening to us, but life's happening all around. And I'll read this last one, and then we'll get into it and get Terry's thoughts as well. He's talking about psychedelics. He said, psychedelics helped me to escape, albeit momentarily, from the prison of my mind. It overrode the habit pattern of thought, and I was able to taste innocence again. Looking at sensations freshly without the conceptual overly was profound. And when we look at that, it's like we don't need this. And I remember he talks about going to India and figuring out, wow, we don't need a substance to get us where we need to be. And he found out through his entire life that, hey, we can live in this place without the aid of any chemical, without the aid of any drug or anything like that. And that's not to say, you know, if your doctor gives you a drug, don't take it. Obviously, do what your doctor says. But this is talking about mind expanding or mind altering things like alcohol and different stuff like that. And so when we look at it, right, we can get back to that place. And you can get back to that place just by understanding that the mind and the narrator is not to be the master. I forget who said it, but he said the mind is a great servant, but a terrible master. And it's very, very, very important to think about that. So, Terry, what are your thoughts?
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here on this day after Christmas. And good morning, Strictly Smart and Deb J and Mrs. B. Ano, Ty, congratulations on 311 days. Getting through that first Thanksgiving and Christmas is it's a big thing. And got New Year's to go and your birthday right on. And just keep it up. Um, Bree's thoughts, good to see you here. 5 years, right on, almost 5 years. Good job. And Crystal, great to see you again. Happy Boxing Day to you. You know, that last quote that Marcus was saying about the psychedelics and how it got him to a place just temporarily. That was with me with booze is alcohol got me to a comfortable place where it would shut my mind down. And, it worked for a little while. And then it stopped working. And then I just started chasing that. I was constantly trying to get that feeling of escape, and that escape just the it would last for less and less time, just like in that quote for Ramdas, it wouldn't last, and then those uncomfortable feelings would just come back harder and harder. You know, um, kind of studying Ram Dass's teachings, it's really interesting. It's there's a lot of similarities between his teachings and 12-step programs or other recovery programs. And the main one, which Marcus already touched on, is being here right now. We can't, and it's impossible to forget about the past and the things we've done, but we can't try live by them. We got to live today. We got to live right now. We're here. We're living right now. Um, for me, I'm okay right now. Everything's good. Yeah, there's situations that are probably coming up, and I'm gonna try and deal with them, but right now I'm good, and I have plans for the future. I understand my past, and I've dealt with the situations that needed to happen. I understand that I'm the person who I am because of the past, because of what's I've been involved with through life, and that's just how life works. It molds us to who we are. Um, I think those are some great quotes. There's a quote that I like a lot, and that's I'm going to read this one: the most exquisite paradox. As soon as you give it all up, you can have it all. As long as you want power, you can't have it. The minute you don't want power, you'll have more than you ever dreamed possible. And that's a really cool quote for me, because that really kind of defines my alcoholism. As far as I wanted all that power. I wanted this and that. And when I gave up that power, I surrendered to alcohol and to the disease of alcoholism. That's when I started to get that power back. When I gave up the alcohol, I was able to get that power back. When I was drinking, I would have situations through life where I was trying to get what I wanted, and I'd try and try and try, and nothing would happen, and or things would get worse in my life. And as I just gave it all up, and basically my term would be just kind of turned it over to whatever, turned it over, let it go. I was able to get that power. I was able to accomplish a lot of great things. I still am. And that's what I try to do.
Yeah, I think
So,
I
yeah.
think it's interesting too, because I think in sobriety and in life, and what Ram Dass points out is that when we give up to what is, right? And I'm not talking about giving up like, oh, I just give up whatever. I'm talking about giving up like, hey, you know what? I'm not in control of everything. I can control very little. And when we give up to that, I think what we find out is that what we wanted isn't really what we wanted, right? You might think, oh, well, I'm getting
Right.
sober and I want to be rich and I want to be famous. I want, more followers or whatever you're into. And once we get sober, we find out that that's not really what we want. And when we don't want it as bad, and I know our culture really does a number on us. And this is what a lot of the Timothy Leary stuff, the Ram Dass stuff, what they really talk about is deculturization, because we're cultured into thinking, strive, work hard, get what you want, get the house, do everything, have the retirement, and build this life. And some of us, like me, damn near break their neck to get it. And they work and they work and they work. And no matter how far they are, it feels like nothing is ever enough, right? You get the car and you're like, okay, well, now I got the car. Now I need the house. And you get the house and you're like, well, now we need a bigger one. Now we need this. Now we need that. And we really focus on it. And when we give up and we say, you know what? None of this matters right now. And that's kind of where I got with my alcoholism. I had this neurotic mind that was trying to get ahead, that was trying to do things. Everything was against me. And I was climbing this hill of life, trying to be somebody, as Ram Dass always says, trying to be somebody. I'm gonna be this person. And I didn't realize that outside of my current belief, outside of my stuff, there were people perfectly happy with barely anything.
Yeah.
And so I realized that, and I realized that our society conditions us to build this name for ourselves and become someone. And what we look at is there's a great quote. Let me see if I have it written down. He says something, I believe I emailed it to myself. He says something like to the effect of, I don't really know who I am, and I don't really care. And for me, when I was trying to get sober, I really cared who I was, who you thought I was, and what you thought about me. And I had a bad version of imposter syndrome where I always felt like a fraud or a failure. And then I realized, like, it doesn't really matter because we're never going to define who we are, right? Like, we never define. Like, Terry's parents gave him a name, my parents gave me a name, but what is a Marcus? What is a Terry? Right? What is it? The narrator in our head? Is it this person saying all this stuff? No, I don't think it's that. What is it? Right? And it's so much more. And when you realize that there's whatever you want to call it, a soul, a being, an existence, there's a connection that's bigger. There's something that's bigger that longs to connect. And we look at that and we're like, what if that's who I am? What if I'm not the plumber, the architect, the asshole, the drunk? What if I'm none of that? What if I'm just whatever I am? And what if that didn't matter anymore? What if I stopped trying to strive to be somebody, as Ram Dass says it? You go through life in somebody training. All throughout life, you're training to be somebody. You're going to be this architect. You're going to be this businessman. You're going to be this person. And along the way, you realize that it's all based on commercialism. It's all based on getting and wanting and desire. And as the Buddha said, the root of suffering is desire. And when we look at this, here's another quote where we talk about dealing with other people, because I know in sobriety, there's a lot of people that struggle with dealing with other people in life. Right? They don't, like, how do I deal with Terry? Terry comes to me and he's like, Marcus, I think you're an asshole, or whatever. He didn't really do that, but let's say he come to me and did that, right? And he comes to me and he says that, and I get all bent out of shape, and then I start saying what Terry's this, and he's this, and that person's a narcissist, and this person's a nice guy, and this person's whatever. And this quote says, when you go out into the woods, you look at the trees and you see all the different trees. And some of them are bent, and some of them are straight, and some of them are evergreens, and some of them are whatever. And you look at a tree and you allow it. You see why it is the way it is. You sort of understand that it didn't get enough light, and so it turned that way. And you don't get all emotional about it. You just allow it. You appreciate the tree. But the minute you get near humans, you lose all of that. And you're constantly saying, you're too this, or I'm too this. And that judgment comes into mind. And so I practice turning people into trees, which means appreciating them just the way they are. And one of the life philosophies that I built throughout sobriety is that I would be no different than you if I was in your situation. So you take anyone who's listening today, and worst case scenario, like there's a guy who's just mean, and he's drunk, and he's angry, and he doesn't want help, or whatever, whoever it is, right? I would be that person had I grown up like him with his same mindset. I would be each and every person on here if I grew up and had the mindset you have. I'd be where you are. And we look at it and we have this understanding and this empathy of, wow, we're all just, as Ram Dass says, walking each other home. And we're trying to figure out what's going on. And sometimes we get caught up in things, and we're programmed to. And a lot of our life is about programming. And when we step back and we deprogram and we understand, this voice in my mind is brought up by society, by parents, by reading, by TV, right? A lot of these things were molded and shaped, not by you. And the beauty and the greatest gift sobriety could ever give you is the ability to choose what you put in your mind and the ability to choose what comes out of your mind. And I remember there's a Bible verse that says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mind speaks, or something like that. Or the mouth speaks. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And that's true, right? Out of the abundance of your heart, your mouth speaks. If a guy's speaking anger, he's probably angry in his heart. If a guy's speaking sad, he's probably sad in his heart. And you look at these things, but we have to look a step further and say, why is it that way? What is it that caused it to be that way? What is it that went into our mind that caused us to think these things? What is it that causes my mind to be like a magnet? And if you remember being a kid, when I was a kid, I was kind of a dork. still kind of a dork. And I'd take magnets, and I'd take them to the playground, and I'd put them in the sand, and I'd try to get that iron, I think it is, that comes up from the magnet, and you get the little fuzzy iron from the sand. And I remember doing that, and our mind is kind of the same way. We have all these thoughts, and these thoughts are like sand, and the magnet comes in, and it picks up the certain things that the magnet attracts it. And your mind is prone to attract certain things. If you're a businessman, you're going to look at everything from a business standpoint. Right? Some guy will come in and say, hey, my car broke. Oh, well, that's going to be $450, and then the dude's going to charge you for labor this. Now, another guy, maybe he's a doctor, and you come in and you're like, I got in a car wreck, and he says, oh, let me see that foot. It might not be broken, but I'm going to tell you about that foot. Or maybe you have a guy who's like a psychologist, and you come to him and you're like, hey, man, I got in a car wreck, and my car's all busted up. And he says, well, how did that focus your mind? How did that trauma affect you? And everyone's going to be looking at this, and what we don't realize is what we've done is we've trained our brain to be like that magnet and suck up those little irons. But it's sucking up not the irons that you want, it's sucking up the thoughts that you've been programmed to think. And if you deal with trauma and abuse and hurt and pain, that magnet is going to suck those thoughts up. And it's not necessarily that you have way more thoughts than most people about that topic, which maybe you do, but it's the fact that it's picking those up. And the fact that it's picking up, and you surrender to it, and you say, where I am is where I am because of where I've been. And that's natural. That's a fact. That's what's going to happen. If anyone drinks as much as I drank, they would be an alcoholic. Plain and simple. That's the way it works. If anyone went through the stuff I went through, they would have the certain trauma. That's a fact. And so we look at these things and we surrender to the fact that I couldn't even choose where I was born, right? And this is something that baffles me, and then I'll shut up so Terry can talk, right? But this is something that baffles me, is the fact that I try to control my life. But I didn't choose to be born in affluent America with whatever the hell I want to eat, with cars with air conditioner and houses with heaters and air conditioners and comfort and a bazillion things on TV to watch. I didn't choose that. And somewhere across the world, there's a poor kid, and he's born in poverty, maybe in Africa or India, and he didn't choose that either. So if we can't choose the very baseline of our life, of our existence, then all bets are kind of off, because that programs us. And the poor kid is programmed a certain way. We're programmed a certain way. And sometimes we will look at it and we'll say, oh, that poor guy, right? Like Ram Dass tells a story where he's walking through India and he's got his traveler's checks, he's got his American Express card, he knows at home he's got money in the bank, and he's walking around and he's looking at these people just sitting on the ground with like a sheet. That's what they wear, is a sheet. And that's all they have to their name. And he remembers going through a country where there's literally a country where people walk with a pouch of money strapped to their foot. And the pouch of money isn't like their wallet. It's the pouch of money that will provide enough for their funeral. Like, that's it. All they have in their name is enough to pay for their funeral. And he remembers walking around and looking at him and being like, wow, I feel so bad for these people. And after he'd been there a few weeks, he realized it was the other way around, because those people were looking at him tied to his American Express card. He loses that card, it's over. He feels like life is done. His cell phone battery dies. He didn't have cell phones back then, but we'll pretend, right? Cell phone battery dies. Life's over, right? Someone doesn't like a comment on Instagram or YouTube. Life's over. Bankruptcy. Life's over. Divorce. Life's over. And the people of India were looking at him, and they were sad for him because he was so attached to each and every little thing. And in our lives, we get so attached to each and every little thing that we forget that that's not what life's about. Life's not about American Express cards, and politicians argue about money and where's the money going to come from and where's this and where's that. Meanwhile, people are starving, and everyone forgets money is man-made. I remember having an argument with my brother, and we were arguing about finance and money and stuff. We like to talk about that stuff. And he was arguing with me, you got to have money to have life live. And I'm like, no, you don't. He's like, well, where's food going to come from? I'm like, well, you get a tomato and it's got seeds in it. You put them in the ground, you get more tomatoes. Pretty basic. He's like, well, how are you going to get the tomato in the first place? You got to have money. I'm like, okay, but money's a man-made issue. It's a man-made issue. And a lot of the things that you're dealing with right now, a lot of the things causing you to get drunk are man-made issues. And a lot of them are issues made up in your mind as well. So Ram Dass was, for those just tuning in, Ram Dass was a philosopher slash psychologist slash spiritual guru kind of guy who taught a lot of good things. And I think there's a lot to learn about sobriety from him. So Terry, what are your thoughts? Go for it.
Well, we have a lot of comments that may seem to some as unrelated, but so far I'm relating all of them to Ram Dass's teachings. And, you know, a lot of it is being in the here and now. Like Ano says, an hour ago, I found a bad rating of me on the internet, got the compulsion to drink, but I didn't because I thought that it wouldn't solve the problem, but would make me hate myself and add to the
Negativity.
negative. And I didn't see if you wrote more. Anyways, that's the, you know, that's I've seen, not on the internet. I haven't looked, but you know, I know there's people that don't have a good look at me or a positive feeling about me or anything like that. And you know, it's from some of my past actions. Some of those actions, well, all of my past has molded who I am. But I'm sober now. This is something I learned right away in sobriety, is that I have to live in the now. That's what Ram Dass talks about a lot. And that right now I'm okay and I'm a good person. And that's what I try to do. And that's all I can do. I can't fix the past. All I can do is try to make those, just try to make reparations for anything I've done, but continue to move forward and live in a positive way. That's what's helped me a lot. I think, I don't know, but I think for the most part, people like me now.
I think you're a pretty
um,
good guy, Terry.
oh, thanks, thanks. You know, and that's what I have to do, is just live now, not worry about the past. You know, Alan talks about I got a month without drinking and then fall back, or I go a month without drinking and then fall back. I've done rehab 5 times, made comebacks and blew it multiple times. Alcohol is the only substance I use. 58 years old and feel pressed for time. And of course, sure, as you get older, it's like, how many more times do I have? And I hear that all the time. But you can start from where you are right now. Doesn't matter how many times you've gone to rehab. The person who ran the rehab facility that we were at, he had gone through rehab 13 times. I'm not suggesting that you keep on drinking or anybody keep on drinking and just keep going back to rehab, because I've seen so many times people go out, they start drinking, and they don't come back. And that's the reality of it. But you can start where you are right now. That's the same thing, right now, and move forward. And just don't worry about how many times you went to rehab. Worry about what you're going to do now and what you're going to do towards your sobriety. That's the important thing. And it can be done. I've got a friend that's a real close friend, and he keeps on going out. And, you know, he's trying to be sober right now, and he's kind of changed the stuff he does. He's trying to get more involved in sobriety, and he's trying to make the right steps. We'll see. He doesn't know. I don't know if he's going to stay sober. Hopefully he does. But, you know, Ram Dass talks about how we have to really think with our heart, not with our mind. Our mind just wants to go, go, go. We got to get this done, got to fix this problem, got to do this and that and this and that. And he really talks a lot about from the heart, with love, try and live life through love. And that's it's huge for me. That's what I try to do, help other people. Um, I think I don't know if I have the quote here, and I'll probably quote it absolutely wrong, but I'll try. And somebody asked him, you know, what's the one main thing that, or I forgot what the question was, but you know what he says about his life is he tries to help other people, and that helps him. And then him helping other people, that's what his kind of life philosophy was, is helping other people helps him. And that's what sobriety has done for me, is trying to help other people. It helps me immensely. It keeps me calm. It keeps that mind from going and going and going. And in the 12 step, like AA, they talk about service, and that's something I do all the time. Last night we had over 500 people go through our rooms. We fed them all, and it was great. It was a really good Christmas, and just hanging out with other people that have these like minds, and their minds can go off onto crazy tangents just like mine, and I can really relate to that. And it's a really rewarding experience. Marcus was talking a little bit earlier about um, well, for me, what it is when I got sober, what I want out of life is so much different than when I was drinking. I wanted all that materialistic stuff. Now I just want to be happy. That's it. And sobriety is bringing that. Helping other people is bringing that. Coming from a position of love, and it's huge. I'm not looking for those materialistic things. Yeah, I want money. Yes, I care about what other people think of me. Absolutely. I don't know how somebody can not care about what other people are thinking of me. But I try not to focus on it. I just try to focus on just being a good person and doing what I can. I have my faults, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think part of it too is realizing that we are not perfect, and we're not what people think, right? People are seeing a tiny perspective into your life, a tiny little glimpse. They don't understand everything. And I think if you come from a place of humility, real humility, and saying, I don't know. I don't have it all figured out. But right now I'm doing this. And you understand that even when you help people, you're not helping people from a place of, oh, let me help you. As I think it was Alan Watts who said, kindly let me help you or you'll drown, said the monkey putting the fish safely up a tree. And it's an interesting quote because it's like, that monkey is putting the fish up the tree because he's like, man, you're going to drown. I know what it's like. When I go in water, I'm going to drown. And he doesn't understand that maybe he doesn't know what's best for everyone. And maybe I don't know what's best for everyone. Maybe I don't even know what's best for myself. And I think understanding and really shedding what Ram Dass calls the somebody suit. You have the somebody suit, and you put this suit on, and it's like, I'm Terry, and I am a cook, and I was an alcoholic. I'm Marcus, I was a businessman, and I was an alcoholic. And we have that suit on, and we're living up to this suit, when in reality, that suit is just something that was kind of gathered over time, and now we're adhering to it. It's kind of like when you see kids on the playground, When I was a kid, I remember being a little boy in school, someone would come up to you, like your friend would come up to you and hit you on the arm and be like, you're a big sissy. And you get really mad. I'm not a girl. You don't understand. I'm not a sissy or whatever. And you would fight to the death about this, not literally to the death, but you'd fight really hard about this because now I am not what you say I am. And it's something that's programmed from life. And it's like, well, does it really matter what I am or what people say I am? Does it matter what people think about me if I know that I'm trying to do my best in the world or maybe just trying to make it in the world? Does it really matter? And we look at this and we surrender to the fact that there is no suit that fits you and me. There is no job title, no description, no whatever, no acronym that fits you and me. It can't be contained. What we are can't be contained. And we look at this and we focus and we're like, I can surrender to this. And that's really the big thing that I found through recovery, which is funny because I was the opposite. A lot of people get recovery and then they get religion or, spiritual or whatever. I was kind of the opposite. I grew up, I was a street preacher and I was very into the Bible and everything like that. And when I got sober, I let all that go. I was like, wow, okay. Yeah, I don't know what there is. And a lot of people have trouble with the higher power thing, but I think the key is realizing that whatever a higher power is, who knows? But it's not me. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what's out there. I don't know what book goes with what. But I do know it's not me. And I do know that when I'm the higher power of my life and I'm the highest power in my life, things get really screwed up. And we look at that. Here's a couple other quotes I'll give you guys. One says, it's important to expect nothing, to take every experience, including the negative ones, as merely steps on the path to proceed. Another one, he says, let's trade in all our judging for appreciating. Let's lay down our righteousness and just be together. What would it look like if we laid down our judgments and we laid down our ability to be right? How many fights, how many wars were started because we're right and they're wrong, right? I forgot who it was. It was Alan Watts, and he says this thing. And Alan Watts and Ram Dass were friends, I believe. And he says this thing. He's talking about democracy and imperialism, and he's like, the whole idea is you better be free, you better be democratic, or we're going to shoot you. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. We go through life, and it's like, I'm right, you're wrong. Or like Ram Dass going through India saying, I should feel bad for these people that don't have leather shoes and wallets and phones and American Express cards and money. And they're looking at him like, wow, you're so chained to that stuff. That must be terrible. And we realize that it's not all it's cracked up to be, and I don't need to be right. Another quote I really like is he says, if you think you're free, there's no escape possible. The minute you think you're free is the minute you're a prisoner. And that could be of your thoughts. That could be of your mind. And it's kind of like sobriety. The minute you think you're healed is the minute something is probably going to happen to show you otherwise. The minute I think, oh, I'm okay, yeah, I can have one drink, is the minute that I lose everything because I'm chained to this. I'm trapped, right? But if I realize, hey, you know what? Yeah, my mind is kind of trapped. Yeah, I do get neurotic sometimes. Yeah, I do think this way sometimes. And we really, really focus. And another quote I'll leave you with is, it's all real and it's all illusory. That's awareness. It's real and an illusion at the same time. And I think a lot of these is to look at the fact that, as Ram Dass says, we don't really meet where the words are. You listen to me talk, you listen to Terry talk. Where we're meeting is the space between the words. Where we're meeting is the thought and the feeling between the words, because we could say whatever. But the fact of the matter is we're meeting somewhere in between, and there's something bigger of a connection going on. And I think if you understand that and surrender to that and say, hey, I don't need to poison myself. I don't need to struggle with this anymore. I can let it go. And I know in recovery, if you're anything like me, when you hear cliches, you kind of cringe. Like when you go up to someone and you're like, man, you don't understand. This happened in my life. And they go, oh, let go and let God. And you're like, yeah, F off, buddy. I don't want to hear that shit. And you hear these cliches and everything, and they got these big grins on their face when they say the cliches. And sometimes it makes you mad. And we look at that, and it's someone meaning well, of course. It's not a bad thing. But we have to look at it, and we have to surrender to it. And this is kind of something that I learned from Ram Dass that really helps me. And a lot of people look at, spiritual gurus, and they go to the spiritual guru, and they go on the top of the mountain. They're like, oh, wise guru, tell me this. And what happens is you go to the guru with your set of things. I'm going to go to the guru because I have this thought in my mind, and because I have these thoughts in my mind, I can't get ahead in life. And you go to the guru and you're like, Guru, I'm making $400,000 a year, and I got this car, and I got this. And the guru looks at you, and he's eating his grapes and probably picking his toes, and he's like, ha 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 ha, 400. What is 400? And you're like, this dude fucking crazy? What the hell? And what just happened is you encountered someone who doesn't buy into the bullshit lie that you bought into. He doesn't buy into, he doesn't, 400,000 what? 400,000 peanuts, elephants. He doesn't care. And I think the secret is in understanding that there's life out there where what you're struggling with, what is big to you, someone else is laughing at and doesn't care. And you say, oh, Marcus, you don't understand. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But the fact of the matter is maybe laughing about it, or maybe looking at it from a different perspective, is what's needed. Maybe going to someone who's like, what does that even mean? What is a stock market? What is that? Are they making chicken stock there, or vegetable stock? What is it? And it throws you off, and you're like, this guy doesn't even know what the hell? We live in a planet where a guy doesn't know where the stock market is? And you're sitting here ready to break your neck, kill yourself over the stock market dropping. And this guy's laughing. And I think the key to spiritual gurus is to understand that it's someone who just doesn't buy into the bullshit that is currently stopping your life. And I'm not saying it's bullshit. There's lots of stuff that really bothers us. But I think if you understand it from a different perspective and you say, why am I hung up on that? Why is that the be all end all? All right, I'm going to have a cigar so I shut up so Terry can talk a little bit.
Rena, I'm not sure if you asked this question earlier, but you just asked, how do you guys deal with the triggers? And somebody else asked that if it wasn't you. I don't remember. I'd have to scroll way back. I don't want to lose where I'm at. Anyways, dealing with triggers, the first thing that I do and that I did when I first got sober is I worked on my sobriety every day so so that I could and I had all these different things that I did when I first got sober. Like I tried to avoid alcohol. I didn't go to parties. I took all the alcohol out of my house, including like vanilla extract, everything. I looked at labels, made sure there wasn't alcohol in it. Um, I tried to hang out with sober people. Just all these different little things. If I did have to go to a party or an event where alcohol was being served to people, I made sure I had a game plan. Like I drove myself so I could leave. Um, I called somebody who's also sober, told them that I'm going to this thing and maybe I might call you. And they, found somebody who would answer their phone that would do that. A couple times I took somebody who knew my situation and that they weren't going to drink either. Things like that to avoid the trigger. But then they're always going to happen. Well, before I get into that, while uh, as I went along in my sobriety, especially that first year, I started to learn what I could do that might be risky for some people and might not. Just, maybe I could go to this party for a couple of hours or just get there right when the party starts and leave after an hour and a half, or when it's polite to leave, that type of thing. And I started to figure out what I could do. I can go down the liquor aisle at the supermarket because the bread's also on the same aisles, but I'm not going to sit there and look at the liquor. I'm going to get the bread I need and get out. And, little things, just kind of try to figure out what was okay and try to pay attention to what might be triggering me. A lot of times it's the life situations. It can be a lot of people talk about the negative situations that happen, that relationship ended, or someone passed away, or somebody got really sick, or I lost my job, or something, and just the real life situations that happen, and that can be a trigger definitely. And what I always have is I have somebody who I can call and or I go to a meeting and talk to people. There's somebody in that meeting that's gone through the exact same thing. And I try not to isolate. That's the biggest thing to avoid the triggers for me. And maybe that's not the biggest trigger for everybody, but for me, it's really the isolating and getting stuck in that mind and not trying to move forward in sobriety or just stay sober. Just sometimes that's all you can do today is just not drink. Another just quick tool is pause, do something else for 15 minutes when you do get that trigger. Maybe whatever it is. For me, I remember it was actually like a year and a half ago, but it really got me going. I was at a baseball game, professional baseball game, and some guy walked by with a really cold beer, and it was a hot day, and dang, that looked so good to me. And that was a pretty big trigger. It was as simple as just seeing this ice cold beer in front of me, and I didn't have anything to drink at that time. I went straight down and got a big old Coke, and that's what I drank. And so just the act of going to get the Coke and saying I'm going to go get a Coke to the person I was with, and telling them that kind of triggered me, and just being open about it, and that helped me a lot. You never know what's going to trigger you, and sometimes it's just, well, usually or a lot of times the triggers come from left field. It's just something that you had no idea would trigger you, and I was talking with a guy the other day. He was talking, it was a holiday dinner. I forgot if it was Thanksgiving or it was before Christmas. So maybe it was Thanksgiving, and it's at the family thing. And, you know, his aunt or whatever everybody was drinking, and he's like 6 months sober. And he found himself reaching for the wine glass that his aunt put down right beside him. But he stopped himself. He's like, then he asked her politely, "Do you mind if you move the wine glass away?" I mean, just little simple things, being aware of what might trigger you. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, and awareness is key. And I think that a lot of people don't realize it, and they think that awareness is just automatic and it just goes wherever. And sometimes it does. Like if you're sitting in a crowded area and you hear a loud noise, your awareness is going to go to that loud noise. But in other times, most of our life, where we're not dealing with fight or flight situations where we need to run or fight or whatever, our awareness is directed by what we think. And your awareness is going to be on alcohol because you thought of alcohol a lot. If you're anything like me, you thought about
yeah,
alcohol like 18 of the 19 hours you were awake a day or whatever it is. And you look at that and you're like, okay, um, yeah, my mind's like a lens. I get what I focus on. And over time, I think Terry and I have both realized that over time, you can you can back that up a bit. I don't think about alcohol nearly as much as I did when I first got sober. And we look at it, and I think about different things now. And that's one of the reasons I like to listen to talks by Ram Dass and other people, is because they put new thoughts in my head, things that I didn't think before. And sometimes there's one little thing that'll get you going, and there's one little thing that'll help you. And for me, when I sit there at those games and I'm like, oh man, I'd sure like a drink, I think to myself, well, haven't you had enough? Like, do you really need to taste what Bud Light tastes like for the 10 zillionth time? I think you know. I think you got it. And so we look at that, and I adhere to the fact that I'm like, hey, you know what? I could chill. I don't have to have that. It doesn't matter. And we look at it and it's like, well, what is this anyway? It's all just programming of the mind. What if I could just be here now? What if I could just relax? What if I could be in the moment and not worry about stuff? And I remember there was a story where Ram Dass first goes over to India, and his friend, that's like kind of his guide, who has been there a long time, is in the car with him, and they got this Land Rover that someone donated to him or let him borrow or whatever, and they're over there driving it, and Ram Dass is in there sitting next to this guy, and he's like, "Hey man, you know how cool it'd be if we rented a boat and went sailing? I mean, that would be such a trip. That'd be really really cool." And the guy next to him's like, "Hey, just be here now, just chill." And Ram Dass is like, okay. He sits there for about 5 minutes, and he's like, hey, you know how cool it'd be if we drove this car up the mountains and we did this and we got a group of people to do that. He's like, hey, chill. Just be here now. And what happens is you need to train your mind to be like that. And you need to train your mind that it doesn't always have to be active. It doesn't always have to be talking. You don't always have to be productive. You can just be here and you can enjoy the moment. And sometimes you can look at it and say, well, I had an alcohol craving. So what? It is what it is. Doesn't mean I have to give in to it. And what
yep,
happens is we look at it, because alcohol is the cousin of the mental illness, obsessive compulsive disorder, also known as OCD. And OCD is an obsession of the mind and a compulsion to do something. I have an obsession of the mind that, I didn't lock the door, so I got to lock it 4 times. I have an obsession of the mind that I need to drink, and then I get a compulsion in my body to go drink. And we don't need to give in to those. We can simply be okay. And as itching and as irritating as they get on our mind, each and every time we don't give in, or each and every time we relax and we're like, yeah, of course my mind's going to talk about drinking. That's what it does. That's not me. Terry and Marcus are not cravings. I'm not a craving. And it's not even going to do anything to me if I don't give in to it. It's just mindless chatter. It's itchiness saying, come scratch me. Scratch, scratch, scratch. And you don't have to give in. You can just say, yeah, well, that's it. And if you ever had a bad itch, you know how that works, right? You get an itch behind your ear, and it's just a little mild irritation. And you're sitting there, and it'll probably go away in 3 minutes. But no, if you're anything like me, you're like, fucking itch. And then you scratch it. And what happens? It gets itchier. You're like, what the freaking hell? Now it's worse. And you got to scratch again. And you got to scratch again. And pretty soon, you're scratching and scratching and scratching and scratching. And the same thing happens with drinking. Just leave it alone. Let it be a mild irritation. But if you scratch it, if you think on it, if you dwell on it, worse, if you give in to it, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And you're going to wonder how you got where you got. And you'll be like, what the hell happened? It was just a little itch. Now I got to go to the doctor because I scratched it. And it's whatever itches do when you scratch them too much. And I don't have to be that way. So what? I'm a little neurotic. So what? I have a little OCD. So what? I don't have everything figured out. I'm just me. And if a Harvard professor that got kicked out of Harvard because he was studying drugs can say, I don't have all the answers, and I never even been to Harvard, never been to a college, except one time I went with a friend. I don't know why. I think we were preaching or something, but that was it. Barely graduated high school. I don't think I have all the answers. So if a guy that was at the top of Harvard for psychology can admit he doesn't have all the answers, I think I could admit that too. And I think I could admit that everything that I built and everything I think matters in the end doesn't matter. And there's a beautiful story, a beautiful talk that he gives where he's talking about a businessman. This businessman builds a life and he's making $80 million a year. And him and his wife are in their 30s. They buy whatever the hell they want. They fly wherever they want. They do whatever they want. And all of a sudden, in their 30s, his wife comes down with a rare form of cancer. And all of a sudden, their life, their fast-tracked everything comes to a halt. And where they were thinking, you know, who's the next private chef that's going to cook for me personally on our plane, on our way to our island, they stop and they think about basic things like, how are we going to get her to eat next? How much time does she have? How much life is left? And we think about these little things. And what happens is these things, as Ram Dass says, force you to realize that you've been lockstepped into a role that life has put on you, a role that you've put on yourself. And it forces you to look at it. And for me, sobriety, sitting there in the mental hospital, forced me to look at the fact that this entire life I built doesn't matter because I'm literally drinking myself to death. And it forces you to stop, and you're not thinking about your 401k and how much you're going to make. You're thinking about, how am I going to breathe in 5 minutes? How am I going to live? And you look at that and everything falls away. And you go to the guru and he laughs when you say all the problems. And he's not laughing at you. He's laughing because he doesn't know what the hell you're talking about. And you look at it and you're like, what the hell matters? And there was an idea that I used to play with in my mind back when I was trying to get sober. And I remember I drove by a liquor store or a bar. I drove by a bar that I always went to. And I had to get home, and I didn't stop at the bar. But as I passed, I thought to myself, you know, I usually stop at that bar, and I usually need to get something to drink. But I guarantee that if I was rushing home because my kids needed me, like there was a medical emergency or something, I wouldn't stop. Even if I was an alcoholic, I wouldn't stop. Like, I don't know, maybe there's some alcoholics that would stop, but if a family member is in danger and you have to get home, you're probably not going to. And I thought to myself, well, what's the difference? And the difference is you're forced to look at things from a real point of view. We have the luxury in our society to do whatever the hell we want whenever we want. Like, I don't know about you, but I got whatever drink I wanted. I got fancy beers from a guy who just made the beers once in a while, and I got them, and, you know, you'd only get to get 3 of them. And we get really comfortable, and we don't realize that every minute you're alive, you're passing the bar on the way to an emergency. Right? Every minute. Like, there's something. I don't know if I'm guaranteed the next minute. I don't know if I'm guaranteed the next breath. And we look at it, and we give up and we give in to all the things that keep us stuck. And so, yeah, let's see if there's any last minute questions, because I know I talked a little too much today.
Let's see, what do we got here? Saw one a little bit earlier. I'm sorry, I'm just looking around here.
Hi to Shane and Real Talk Recovery. Good to see you guys here.
Yeah. A couple people were mentioning. Ano says, Mrs. B. Yes, I do dwell on the positives of staying sober and negatives from drinking. When I drink, I can't do a damn thing, but get more alcohol and pass out sober, and I can live a somewhat. Being sober, I can live a somewhat normal life. And yeah, for me, that's something we haven't really mentioned today is a gratitude, and that's huge for me. Being happy with what I got. Um, it's big, even if it's just the fact that I woke up today, or maybe it's one step more. I woke up and I'm sober, and just simple things. I'm very blessed with what I have in my life. Things are going okay. I have to deal with some things. It's okay, but things are good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'll leave you guys with this quote. And thanks for being here, everyone. If you're new,
Thank you, everybody.
subscribe, click the bell, and give us a thumbs up on the video. That helps them go out to more people. And if you do want to support what we're doing, go to talksober.com, click the support button. And after the first of the year, we're actually going to have a live class where we take you through a sobriety training. It's not like a rehab or anything because we're not doctors or anything like that. But it's the steps that I wish I had when I got sober. And I think Terry feels the same way. I wish that was there when he got sober too. So you can check that out, talksober.com, click on support the channel. And I'll leave you guys with this quote by Ram Dass. I thought it was fitting, and just as my way to say thank you for what he's done. And also the realization that even though someone's gone, they're still with us in thought, in word, and in energy. And so this one says that death has such great importance in this society that it affects everything. I learned from my guru that death is not the enemy. I see it as another moment. Yet it's the end of an incarnation that means going on to other incarnations. And when we look at life that way, everything starts to change. And when we start to put different thoughts in our mind and start to focus on being sober and loving and living and being, then everything changes.
Yes. Right on. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, and we will see you guys on the 2nd, I think is our next one. Thanks again for joining. Support the channel, hit the like button, and we'll see you guys next week. Also, join the Facebook group if you want to talk with us a little bit more. I'll put the link in the chat box and in the comments as well. Thanks again, guys. See you after the new year, and stay sober.